Hey everyone, I've got a fantastic story for you today about how a simple school fundraiser became this incredible real world math lesson. We're talking about getting sixth graders genuinely excited about things like fractions and decimals by putting them in charge of their very own business. It's all about these amazing real world simulations, and this one is a classic. Let's dive in. So, it really all boils down to this one question. How can a single, humble chocolate chip cookie teach an entire class about the nuts and bolts of running a business? Well, it turns out that the journey of that cookie, from a list of ingredients to a happy paying customer, is the perfect bite-sized lesson in business math. And for these kids, it was the key to chasing a much, much bigger dream.
And there it is. That's the hook. See, this wasn't just some abstract math problem in a textbook. This was a mission. The students had a goal they were genuinely passionate about, a trip to the Renaissance Festival, and they wanted to design their own costumes. But, like in the real world, there was a very real obstacle: money. You've got real stakes, which means you get real motivation.
So what did they do? They came up with a pretty brilliant solution: the Scholars Cup Café. It was a student-run pop-up selling coffee and baked goods to teachers and parents on Friday mornings. Every single penny of profit was going straight toward their trip, which instantly turned these abstract math concepts into a very tangible, high-stakes game. Okay, first things first. Before they could sell a single cookie or a cup of coffee, they had to figure out their prices. And they couldn't just, guess. They needed a solid strategy to make sure every single item they sold was actually making them money. So they used a method that comes straight from the food industry playbook. It's called cost plus pricing. The idea is actually pretty simple. You figure out exactly what it costs you to make something, then you add a specific percentage on top for your profit. This way, you're always covering your costs and building that fund for your goal. And here's how that breaks down. It's basically a three-step process. First, you get into the nitty-gritty and calculate the cost of a single serving. Then, you decide how much profit you want to make. That's your markup. And finally, you round it to a nice, clean price that looks good on a menu. Let's see how they did this with a real example. To really get this, we're going to zoom way in on just one thing: the classic chocolate chip cookie. This is exactly where all those lessons on fractions and decimals suddenly become absolutely crucial. I mean, check this out. You can't just use the price of a whole 5-pound bag of flour, right? You have to figure out what just 2¼ cups of it actually costs. And same for the eggs. What's the price of just 2 eggs out of a carton of 12? This is where the math gets super specific, and you're using unit rates and fractions to find the true tiny cost of everything. So after adding up the precise cost of every single ingredient that went into the cookie dough, the flour, the butter, the sugar, those 2 eggs, the total to make one batch of 24 cookies came out to $7.81. But you're not selling the whole batch at once, right? So the next step is absolutely key. They divided that total batch cost by 24, and that's how they figured out that each individual cookie cost them about 33 cents in ingredients. But they weren't done yet, not by a long shot. Now, this is a really cool real-world detail. Real businesses know that things just go wrong sometimes. A cookie breaks, a batch gets a little too brown, someone drops something. To account for that, they add something called a waste factor. It's like a small financial cushion to cover the cost of those little real-world mistakes. So they took their 33-cent ingredient cost and they added a 10% waste factor, and that brought the final, true, all-in cost to 37 cents per cookie. This is the number they could use with total confidence to set their $1 selling price, knowing that all their costs, even the mistakes, were totally covered. All right, so after all that super careful planning and all that math, how did they actually do? Let's take a look at the financials from just one Friday morning. This is where you get to see all that hard work pay off. On this one Friday, the students brought in $199 in revenue. Now, that's the big top-line number, every single dollar that came into their cash box from selling 127 items. That's a pretty fantastic start. But as any business owner knows, revenue isn't profit, not yet. First, you have to subtract the cost of goods sold, or COGS. That's just a fancy term for the ingredient cost of everything they sold that day. After subtracting that, they were left with a gross profit of about $134. But ingredients aren't the only expenses, are they? They also had to account for things like paper cups, napkins, and other supplies. And, very cleverly, they decided to spread out their one-time startup costs over 8 weeks. We call these operating expenses.
So after you subtract those operating expenses from the gross profit, you finally get to the number that really matters, the bottom line, the net profit. For one Friday morning of work, the class earned $115.99 towards their trip. How cool is that? And here's the whole story, all laid out in what's called a profit and loss statement. Think of it like the ultimate scorecard for any business. It tells you everything, from the very first dollar of revenue that comes in the door, all the way down to the final net profit, the money that is truly 100% theirs. Okay, but making the money is only half the story. The real lesson, the real wisdom, isn't just about earning it. It's about understanding what these numbers are trying to tell you. This is how you turn raw data into smart, strategic business decisions. Okay, take a look at this. Their total food cost percentage was just over 32%. That means for every dollar they earned, only about 32 cents went back into buying ingredients. Now get this, the professional industry standard for a healthy restaurant is between 28 and 35%. These sixth graders, just using their math skills, landed right in that professional sweet spot. It's amazing. The numbers also teach you the super important difference between markup and margin. This is something that trips up a lot of new entrepreneurs. Markup asks, how much should I add on top of my cost? But margin asks, what percentage of the final selling price is actual profit? For their cookie, the markup was a huge 163%, but the profit margin was 62%. Knowing that difference is absolutely critical. And this is where it gets really strategic. When you calculate the margin for each item, you can instantly spot your superstars, like that drip coffee with an incredible 83% margin. And you can spot your underperformers. See that granola yogurt cup? Yeah, it's making money, but its 40% margin is kind of dragging down the overall average. And that brings us to the final question, and I'm going to leave this one with you. You're the CEO of the Scholars Cup Cafe. You see that data for the yogurt cup. What do you do? Do you raise the price and risk selling fewer? Do you try to find cheaper granola? Or do you just drop it from the menu and focus on your winners? There isn't one single right answer. But the fact that you can even ask this question using real data you calculated yourself, well, that's the entire point. That's how a cookie teaches you business.